Welcome to Make Your Mark Live. My name is Mark Moyer, and I'm super thrilled to have Emily Jaenson with me. Today, she is the general manager of the Reno Aces, which is, as you all know, the AAA affiliate of the Arizona Diamondbacks, which you also know is the team that's somewhere in the Southwest. No, I'm joking. They're a great team. In fact, still bitter over their 2001 defeat of my New York Yankees, but that's another story. Anyway, and what I'll want to talk about with Emily is everything. So we got a lot to cover. Emily, welcome to the webinar.
Thanks, Mark.
So first things first, I like to just do a quick little sort of personal rundown on you and really discuss sort of what got you into sports in the first place. And I know that's a great story, but give everyone an idea of where you grew up and where you decided to go to college and that sort of thing.
Sure. So like most people who work in sports, I was an athlete. Growing up, I played just about everything. I played soccer for half a second at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and then focused on my studies. And what my studies meant for me was how do I work in sports? And at the time, I thought the only way to be a part of professional sports was on the medical side. You're free to call me naive. If only I knew now what I knew then. However, being a physical therapist was really not something I was interested in. I have more of a creative side, a business acumen, and finding a way to make that work in sports for me meant getting a degree in communications, in advertising. And so I interned for movie studio, I interned in radio, I ran a couple advertising campaigns. I did a lot of things, and I had a job offer in Chicago to work for an ad agency. I turned it down for an hourly paid internship with the Chicago Bulls in ticket sales. And I spent 9 months with them selling season and group tickets, and learn sort of the ins and outs of what it is to work in a front office, what roles are available, how ticket sales plays into an organization, and how that's really the lifeblood of any professional sports organization are the people who buy the tickets to attend the games. Those fans in the stands, they make the wheels go round. I finished first in group sales. It was kind of like a competition among our 14 interns. However, I did not get the job at the end of the internship. And for me, that was huge disappointment. I'm really competitive. And so losing isn't something that I love. I don't think anybody specifically likes that. However, what happened was that loss of that job turned out to be a huge opportunity. So when one door closes, it's so true that another door opens. And when I was working for the Bulls, I found myself really interested in what was happening in community relations. That curiosity was related to how does a sports organization fit into the community, benefit the community, and what do they do for goodwill. So the door that opened to me after my stint with the Bulls was working for Muscular Dystrophy Association Chicago, which is a pretty big nonprofit. And I worked with them for several years on partnerships. The way that relates to sports organization is you've got your corporate partnerships department who sells advertising. I had an opportunity to connect this specific nonprofit to the other teams, the professional sports teams in Chicago, sort of build those bridges. And for me, it all came full circle many years later when I get the role of GM. One of the hats that I wear at the organization is overseeing community relations and really figuring out how do the Reno Aces serve the Northern Nevada community.
Wait a minute. We skipped over a bunch of stuff that I want to touch on real fast. Of course, we fast forwarded, but you mentioned community relations and all that sort of thing, and you were with the MDA. Tell me a little bit about if an athlete wants to, and I know this is a little bit off what we're going to talk about, but I'm curious, if an athlete wants to participate or be a part of, whether it's community relations, whether it's a specific organization, how do you feel there? I mean, is that something that you guys map out a strategy? You say, okay, Bob Smith or Nancy Jones, here's how you're going to do it. You're going to just make appearances here and there, or you're going to sign some autographs, or you're going to record some PSAs or something. How does that usually work? If I approach you and I said, hey, I really want to pitch in, I really want to help your organization.
Yeah. So what I would start with is a conversation of discovery. So Mark, what are the things that you're interested in? What are the ways in which you want to contribute? Besides being great at this sport, like what are some of the other things that you're really good at? Is it connecting people? Is it, taking really great pictures? Is it just being a really warm, friendly personality? How comfortable are you in social situations? So I start to do that discovery on how that athlete, what's going to make them most comfortable and how can they make the biggest contribution. And we'll go from there, because you're going to be more successful when you care, and when it's something that you feel comfortable doing, and that you can thrive at. And so we start with that initial discovery conversation, and we can build sort of an opportunity around those ideas.
Now, are you pretty, do you feel comfortable figuring out, or you're good at figuring out which of the athletes are truly genuine about their care about it, and some are just sort of doing it because their teammate is doing it, or because they kind of want to look good PR wise? I mean, is that pretty obvious, or not necessarily?
Well, for me, it doesn't really matter as long as they show up for the people that they should be showing up for. So even if you just want to get a free round of golf, if you show up with a smile on your face at the Ronald McDonald House golf tournament and shake hands and you're a happy person and you get to golf for free, like I'm okay with that. Because the first step is like doing the thing. Like you've got to show up and you have to get those reps, just like you have to in a sport. And then you start to understand, like, do I like this? Okay, yes, I do. So I want to do more of these things. How can I do more of these things? Oh, can I have my own platform? Like if I stood for something, what would I stand for? And then in the front office, there's a lot of talented people at marketing, at social media, at community relations. That then as an athlete, you can go and talk to those individuals and understand how to get better in those areas.
That's really cool. So now, taking that step back again, I know that you spent a couple years after you were with the MDA. You spent a couple years being an entrepreneur. You did your own thing, but then you went to work for the Reno Aces. Now you spent a little bit of time there, but you left. But what made you, tell me a little bit about that transition of, number one, going there, and then number two, leaving there to go on to do something else, because obviously that came around full circle.
Totally. So when I was offered a job with the Reno Aces, it was in corporate sponsorship. So selling that advertising, selling those sponsorships for visibility to companies through the game of baseball, through our ballpark. When I got that role, I had about 8 years experience, and the role I was offered was an account executive role, which typically it's like maybe 1 to 3 years experience. And at that point in my career, I had to make a decision. Do I take a step back with the plan to take a huge step forward? Or do I say no because I feel like this role is beneath me, like I've excelled past this? And so I had that crossroads in my mind. And what I decided to do was take the job with a commitment to myself that I was going to create the role that I deserved within a short window of time. I gave myself like a year and a half to get to where I wanted to be. So I took it, took a huge step back in pay, all of those things. But in my mind, I had like that athlete mentality that, hey, this is my goal and I'm going to work my tail off to get there. And I did. Within 2 years, I was vice president of corporate partnerships. I had met really high goals that were set for me in that sponsorship department. I even had a baby during that time, and I just kept chipping away at my goal so that I could, make it to the top. And ultimately, I think that mentality really served me. So oftentimes I get a chance to speak to people who are in college or new college grads or, making some type of transition. And I tell them it's okay to take a step back with a plan to take a step forward, because oftentimes we have this like really specific position in mind and it's not quite available. But I promise you, if you go in and you do the work, same as you did when you were an athlete, that's going to stand out and you're going to make it to that next level. So anyway, 2.5 years later, I'm VP at the company, super happy. We're doing really well. And my husband was in the military for over 10 years and had an opportunity to take a corporate position in Houston, Texas. And being someone who moved around a lot for my career and then also for his, I said, let's go. Let's figure this out. And we lived in Houston for just over 2 years. And in that time, I had an opportunity to do a lot of really cool stuff, work with the Harris County Houston Sports Authority as a contractor on some really big events. I worked as a contractor for a women's athletic sportswear brand, building their brand through marketing. And then I also worked at the biggest hospital in Texas, helping them activate their sports partnerships to build their business. I'm not saying I got a degree in Houston, but like it really felt as if I did, because I did a lot of really big experiences in the workplace and throughout sports in a 2-year window. And
did you try to, was there any effort to sort of latch on or look at the Astros at all for any reason, or?
I did. I did look at the Astros, and then I got pregnant. So I had my second son when we were living in Houston, and a baseball schedule is pretty difficult to manage under any circumstances. Literally, just being alive, it's a hard schedule to manage, let alone when you're having a baby. So I decided to stick to the contracting route, and I'm thrilled that I did. I met a lot of really awesome people. We had a suite at the Astros games, so at Minute Maid Park. So I got to see a lot of games the year they won the World Series, but we will not go into any of those additional details. And anyway,
what are you? I don't know what you're referencing.
I don't either.
Anyway,
I don't either. So anyway, everything happens for a reason with your career, like when you want it to, and when you're intentional about it, and when you make the best of all of your circumstances. And so what happened from that is like my resume continued to build with all the things that I had done. Like I got to volunteer at the Super Bowl. I was a sales director for an international event. I helped run an SB type show in Houston, Texas. Like I started to do and have all these experiences outside of my normal like season business, working for a sports team. And those experiences really started to create this version of Emily with like a greater curiosity, more ideas, like more exposure. And on top of it, I was also learning. Like I was so thirsty for what's the next news, what's the next tech, how is this all going to work, what's the future of sports. And so those things combined with the fact that I kept in touch with the Aces this whole time, and I'll touch on like what networking means during this conversation. When the GM role opened, I didn't apply. I got a phone call that said, hey, I have a role for you and I need to convince you to move back to Reno.
Not a bad call to get.
No, definitely not.
GM. So now I'm a big Seinfeld fan. Who isn't? I'm assuming, well, anybody under the age of whatever may not, but know about it. But George Costanza, as we all know, became the assistant to the traveling secretary of the New York Yankees. So we all know that it can't be that hard to get a job in baseball, but general manager is pretty damn bad. That's pretty good. So, so you get that call. And so now the decision is, do we again pick up our stakes from Houston, go to Reno, and be the El Numero Uno, the big jefe? How did that, was it a quick decision? Not really. How'd that go?
So a lot of times we overcomplicate things. And what my husband and I did was we went back to the old pro and con list. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we learned how to make pros and cons lists in second grade.
Yeah.
And they're still
Yeah.
completely relevant
Sure.
today. I mean, it's really getting your thoughts out on paper. And,
Yeah.
there's two questions besides pro and con. Like there's two other ways to put it. It's like, you could live in a light of like, what's the worst that can happen? Or you can think like, what's the best thing that can happen? And for me, we talked a lot about what's the best thing that could happen for us. And those really, really outweighed the bad. And I talk about this a lot because at the time that this decision, like this offer came to the table, I had a 3-year-old and a 9-month-old son. We had built a house and moved into it only 6 months prior to that. Built this home that we thought we were going to stay in forever. My husband had a really good thing going. I had a great job and a lot of opportunity in Texas. We had some really great friends. So like there was a lot of things in the column of like, we have all of this stuff. Like, why give up all of these things to take this chance? And we tie ourselves like way too hard to like physical things and location. If those friends are friends, like we're going to be friends forever. A house, we're in our 30s, like we'll get another house. Jobs, I'm already offered a new one. Like we've proven that my husband is employable. Like we'll figure that out. And so we didn't let ourselves be bound to that home or that like physical location. And I think once you can like unbind yourself from that, it makes the decision to leap and to move a lot easier.
So you accept the position, you show up for work. I don't know if there's such a thing as showing up the first day, but how are you indoctrinated into, okay, here you go, GM. And were you shocked by what was involved, or was it more of or did you expect it to be more? I mean, where was it in your expectations?
Yeah, so the timing was interesting because I started May 1st. So our season is already underway. We'd been planning for over a year on all the things that were to happen that season. And so you come in as a new leader when, like in baseball, it's like you get in the speedboat and you gas it at 70 miles an hour, like
right.
for 5.5, 6 months. And I couldn't tell people, stop or change the plan. I had to trust in what their decisions were, support them in making those things successful. But what I started to do was ask throughout the front office, like, let's test this. I'm going to ask why, and then I want you to show me the data. So we can all use this season to start to understand, like, what was our decision-making process and the things that we decided to do? Did they work? And then how would we pivot in the future? We've all been a part of organizations that have used the "if it ain't broke, don't fix it" mentality.
Yeah.
And that's not the way I exist. But I think that that plan to ask why and show me the data really helped support what they were doing, but like make sure that I was really turning up their curiosity to test whether their decisions were good ones, and then how are we going to enter into the next year.
So when you so you start May 1st, and as the season's going along, I'm assuming you're learning on the fly, but was there anything that stood out that you said, wait a minute, we really need to change blank? Or did you feel like everything was going pretty well as it was?
It's a tough question to answer. You have this newbie mentality when you start up a job, like your eyes and your ears are open and you don't have like you don't have the habits that have been developed over time, or you become blind. You only see certain things. So you try to use that as an advantage, that you can see things that others don't, because you didn't make up the plan. You didn't buy the thing and put it in the place like somebody else did that. So I think that was happening everywhere. I mean, the Aces have always been a really, really well-run organization, a beautiful facility. But anyone can spot improvements when you start something new. And what I did was listen for feedback, and then thought about, like, how can I make a contribution?
Are you feared around the ballpark? No, I'm kidding. I'm sure you're not. But so let's talk about a couple of things that I want to make sure I wanted to cover today. And most important, obviously, this virus has completely turned everything upside down with a whole lot of, people's lives, unfortunately, but also the sports world, music world, all kinds of things. And it's really sort of taken away a lot of our ability to socially interact, but also to attend sporting events and so forth. And baseball itself has been especially affected. And, we were just talking a few minutes ago about, right now, as we record this live, Major League Baseball and the Players Union are still struggling over, reaching an agreement that will allow the season to happen. And without that happening, minor league baseball doesn't happen. So everything is hinging. So many lives are being affected by this agreement that's hopefully going to be ironed out, we hope. But tell me a little bit about what it's been like for the previous sort of 2 or 3 months since that day, March 13th or March 12th, whatever the date was, March 11th, whatever, that they said, we're postponing, we're canceling, we're shifting. How did you need to change things? I mean, what did you do almost right off the bat, and how have things gone from there?
Sure. So this time is unprecedented. I mean, it's one we'll talk about forever. And when this all kicked off, what it felt like was if you were standing like on the bow of a ship in a storm, and like every day you wake up, you have to stand at the bow of that ship, and the waves just smack you in the face, like relentlessly. You're reacting to the news, you're reacting to the email, you're reacting to the phone call. You got Sports Center playing on one TV and, Fox News or CNN on the other. Like, it's this state of reaction, and it is miserable. It is so miserable. And I remember when it first happened, we thought, there's no way this could go longer than 3 weeks. Like, they'll send us home 3 weeks. We'll be back up and running. Like, we had this date of May 15th for when our season would restart. And that seemed like the worst case scenario. I would have never imagined June 16th. Like, I'm still sitting in my home office. But what happens in leadership is this shift. Like, pretty soon, like, you've been beaten by the seas, you're wet, you're tired, like, you cannot live in this state of reaction anymore. And you make this conscious decision to, like, head to the helm of the ship, take the wheel, and, like, get back in charge of whatever it is that you can become in charge of again. And you live with 1 foot in today and, like, 1 foot in tomorrow, the future of the career, whether that's tomorrow, 1 week, 1 month, 3 years, whatever. So our team, what we did is we created an interim rally cry. We have our standard rally cry of "We are the place to be," and we work on being, like, the best place possible to watch a baseball game, to see the future talent of Major League Baseball, to do really fun things for our community. We could no longer be the place to be. Like, it was specifically impossible and opposite of being the place to be. So what could we do? And what we decided was that we were going to shift that mentality and start to work on the future. So how can we be better essentially for tomorrow? And we identified 3 areas of the business where we could take a deep dive, form subcommittees, like, really dug into the data, and started to have intention in our day, like, really owning that area. And, like, that was what you spent half of your time on each week. It turned from a curse to, like, this gift to really help position us for the future. And as we stand, we're in day probably like 75 of this, like, 90-day plan with our deep dive into the business. And it has changed the way everyone feels about their work. Like, you give your employees purpose. And for somebody who employs at our organization a lot of really young, ambitious people, this is extraordinarily difficult for them. All of a sudden, their career is on hold. They had an idea of what tomorrow would be, and it is no more. And so I think the greatest gift you can give as a leader is a sense of purpose. And if you give them that purpose and that intention, you give them the keys to their future.
Oh, that's great. So give me one example of something that you feel the Aces have been able to accomplish that you probably wouldn't have had a chance to do on your own.
Yeah. So the three pillars, the three projects we're working on, one is our guest services model. So we're rolling out, we would have never done this. This would have been the middle of our season. We're rolling out a brand new guest services guide and training for our staff that is more dialed in and more absolute, where we can win our way for the future, and define what those terms are. Like, let's say you work for a luxury hotel. You know that your rooms are whatever, $700 a night. You are never going to list your hotel for $75 a night. And you know that because you work there and you understand like the product. So if you translate that to our baseball experience at Greater Nevada Field with the Reno Aces, if we know that our way is X, like, and everyone is aligned, then you know how to handle almost every situation that comes up with a customer, with a player, with a partner, with a fan. Imagine if we were all universally trained and aligned in our guest services model. It would be an incredible feat. So that's one of the areas I'm really excited about that we've unrolled.
Oh, that's awesome. You know, it's funny. I had on a podcast episode of mine a few months ago, Jesse Cole, who's the owner of the Savannah Bananas.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've seen, if anybody's seen him out there, and he's always wearing the big yellow tux, and he really takes his ownership seriously. But a lot of what he talks about, and I think it's important for anybody in baseball to understand, is the importance of making the fan experience much more of an experience now. You know, I think that unfortunately, sports fans have so many different distractions and so many other things they can be doing. And a lot of people choose to stay home and watch it on TV or stream it or whatever it is, that now going to the stadium needs to be a much fuller experience than just, you know, when I was a kid, you just go there, you sat down, you had your, you know, your peanuts and Cracker Jack, whatever it is, and your cotton candy, and you watched the baseball game, and that's what you did. Now there's all kinds of other things that need to keep people a little bit more engaged, because the pace of the game, it's a little bit slower, but it's still not entirely different than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. But our consumption or ability to consume either is a lot higher, or we need to have more stimulation, it seems like. So, you know, give me a sense of, you know, what the Aces are, what you guys are trying to do, or are you trying to do things that kind of feed into that a little bit?
Yeah. 100%. And I agree with you and your sentiments. And, you know, believe it or not, baseball is a really humble sport. And I think that doesn't do baseball a lot of favors when it comes to the fan experience and fan engagement, because today we go to this thing to know the players, to feel like we're a part of their community. And there's not a lot of players that have big brand deals or are really active on social media. And I think that comes from the humility of the sport. I mean, a guy has to slog their way through the minors for years before they make it to the show in a typical scenario.
Right.
And it's all about the team, which is fantastic. But today's fan wants to know about you. They want to know about you specifically. So that's one of the ways that I think, you know, we need to start to elevate the sport, is getting players more involved in social media and helping them with those platforms and how to stand out and understand that it's really a benefit to them in the future. Even if they, you know, the guy with the locker next to you is going to make fun of you in the clubhouse, like, you're going to win if you continue to elevate your brand. Teams around the country, including us, are investing in experiences, in group spaces. So those places where you can gather around the game, because that's more of what happens today is a gathering around baseball. It's where you want to hang out with your friends and your buddies, where you want to drink a beer. It's a longer event. So the way that we do it in Reno, we have a lot of fun theme nights on Saturdays. That's kind of our thing. It's a big thing in minor league baseball, is like picking a theme and running with it. Fireworks Friday is a staple for us. We put on incredible fireworks shows after every Friday night game. Thirsty Thursdays, of course, with our $2 beers and those fun gathering spaces, bringing in cool product, elevating our menu with some really fun items. This year we extended our nets foul pole to foul pole, again, keeping the fan experience forward and making sure that you can post about us on social media while drinking your beer. If you don't have your eye on the batter's box, like, you're going to be safe and protected. We also upgraded our lights at the stadium to LED. Great for the players, but also great for the fans. I'm sure anyone who watched college football last fall saw some pretty cool shows with the LED lighting. So it's continuing to be fan focused and fan forward, and thinking about that fan and what they want when they come out to the ballpark.
Speaking of that, I know that everybody knows that Nevada is, gambling mecca. And I know that some sports have sort of lagged behind others in terms of their comfort level with betting on the sport and so forth. But explain to me, am I allowed to go to a game in Reno and, from my phone say, what's the over under on, total hits in the game kind of a thing? And if I can, is that something that the Aces encourage or not really?
No, I wouldn't say that we're at the level yet of like European professional soccer, where you're making your bets, before you enter the stadium. People bet all over the place, but it's not something that we're currently undertaking at the moment. And there's definitely some rules around that, but we'll see what the future holds. I think feels like this year almost anything's up for grabs.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, I'm hoping that I can walk into the stadium there, and right in the front there's gonna be a blackjack dealer. That'd be
not happening. We don't have a gaming license, believe it or not. Nevada controls that with a pretty tight grip.
Yeah, well, as they should. So you had mentioned, we chatted before about the idea of balancing your focus on the present and the future, and especially now where we all have to really become much more comfortable pivoting, because just every day there seems to be something new that changes the rules a little bit. Tell me a little bit more about how you balance that out, and not just with your work for the team, but just how you work day to day.
Sure. So I like to say that intention delivers your day. So what I mean by that, and the way I do that is, there's that other saying, you run the day or the day runs you. And I would rather run my day than be reacting to everybody else. So the first thing that I do every morning when I wake up is I check my calendar, and I write out my schedule in time blocks. And the first step is filling in all my meetings. And then the second step is filling in all the stuff that I have to do around those meetings, including email. I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make today is letting email run their life. They just keep their Outlook open and constantly just respond all day long. I think if you can push those email responses, a time block in the morning, and one in the afternoon, that's all you need to do. I mean, I don't think that you need to get back to somebody within 5 seconds of sending you an email. My other tip around email is do not check email first thing in the morning. So I see a lot of people who, instead of opening their calendar, they open their email, and the first thing that they do every morning is start responding to all the messages that they got overnight. Well, that is somebody else's to-do list for you, not your to-do list. Certainly you owe those people a response, but you're in your role because of your unique talents, and you need to spend the majority of your time working on those core projects.
That's great advice, by the way, because it's not just for you holding a job, but it's for entrepreneurs. When you run a business, especially, we have a habit of reacting, being reactive, not being proactive. And as you said, I love what you just said earlier about, the concept of, you're in charge of your day, not the other way around. So that's fantastic. Now, do you find that, look, obviously there's going to be times where things do happen during the day that require that attention, but you're right. I think that people will survive if they don't hear back from you immediately, except for me. So with that said, we're all sort of keeping our fingers crossed on the upcoming season. We're keeping our hopes up that things are going to happen. But I want to talk about sort of your future, meaning, yes, the gig, this is going great with the Reno Aces and you're the general manager. I mean, this is awesome. Just tell me quick, how many people work for the Aces for the most part?
When we are fully up and running,
Yeah.
we also have a USL soccer team that runs out of our stadium too.
Okay.
We've got 55 employees.
Got it. So you're managing all these people, and obviously there's some concerns over whether some of them can stay and not, and this and that, I'm sure. But do you hope someday you get the phone call to? Should I assume you'd love to be working in Major League Baseball for the big?
Not specifically. For me, it's all about the opportunity. And at this point, it's also about the location. The beauty of working in minor league baseball is the organizations are smaller and they're more nimble. You can have an idea and you can see it come to fruition within a pretty short window of time. Right. Over the last 2 years, each year I've designed and launched a new brand. Like, for somebody who had a passion for advertising and was creative, like, dang, what a dream come true. If I was in a major league, working for a major league stadium, everyone's got their roles on that team, and they're much, much more specific. So for right now, like, I'm really enjoying, I love this place. I love Northern Nevada. I love where I work. I'm lucky that at the Aces, we have a whole leadership team. So there's 6 of us that work in sort of the C-suite level. We're super collaborative. We've got a great team structure. We're trying to get better every day at managing our people. So as much as I talk about, like, focus on the future and what that means, for me, that doesn't mean a different job or a different role with a different team. For me, that means expanding my influence so that I could help more people.
That's great.
When I took this job, I was the first female in this role in 20 years. And I didn't fully understand what that meant until I got here and I started talking about it. And there is a big, big need for female leadership in sports. And I look forward to expanding my voice, helping more women and more men, because you wouldn't believe how many males reach out to me and say, how do I hire a great female leader? Hey, I have this question about maternity leave. So for me, my future looks like the Reno Aces, and it looks like expanding as much as I can to help the world of sports.
Well, let's talk about what you just said there. When you first came on board, being the first female GM in 20 years in minor league baseball, what have you sensed a sort of any sort of a shift in how you're perceived from your male counterparts, or are you feeling, is it even? Are there still some old grumpy guys that are not ready for that, or how are you seeing it?
No, it's not even close. But Oprah, well, somebody before Oprah said it, and then Oprah reset it. You can't be what you can't see. So the longer I can occupy this role, the more normalcy
Great.
is created around a female leader at a sports team. In terms of baseball, like absolutely, this is an old boys club. And then there's another group of new leaders coming up the chain. So sort of see a dichotomy in that realm. And it's interesting, like you got to have some thick skin and you got to let it roll off your back a little bit. But you also have to be able to like step up and stand a little bit taller and not let any of the microaggression make you shrink, but help you build. Like sometimes I don't say anything directly to the person, like when I'm the recipient of something that is like not so great, but I'll use it for the future. Like, hey, maybe I didn't know that somebody would talk to me that way, or maybe I didn't realize like that might be a situation I would be in. It's the first time it happened to me. I don't know how to handle everything perfectly like the first go around, but what I can do is go back, think about it, and then present that scenario to make the next woman a little bit more prepared when that inevitably happens in the future.
Well, look, that's I mean, I said it almost facetiously only because I think baseball is one of those sports that happens to be much more of the the boys club kind of a thing. So I think that not just I'm sure on one hand it's probably a little tiring to hear a lot about the concept of breaking a barrier, because you understand that you can do the job. I mean, it's a job and it's something that you can do. You can run a team, you can manage these different parts of it just as well as anybody else, kind of a thing. But on the other hand, you also probably feel a little bit of a responsibility to embrace it a little bit and run with it, and sort of be the role model for other young ladies and women that who would love to be. I mean, they see you and they say, well, wait a second, I really can do that. I can be there, because look, baseball is universally loved sport. It's not a male sport only. It's both sexes. So there's every reason why you should be sort of excited to be in this role. And but at the same time, you're right. It's going forward, you want to take what you're doing to the next level and continue to do that. What's aside from the season being suspended and aside from budgetary reasons, is there anything that's sort of standing in the way of growing bigger? I mean, is it, are there any, what are your hurdles, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, I think I experience a lot of the same hurdles that other people do. It's just having the courage to keep going,
Right.
or to try something new, or to not care about other people's opinions that aren't serving you. Like, hey, your audience isn't everybody. Like, there's billions of people on this planet. Like, think about who you are ready to serve. Have that mentality around who you can help and who is willing to accept the help from you, and know the results that you can give them if you try. And one of the hurdles that I think about is like, what if I didn't? What if I didn't say anything? What if I didn't speak on that stage? Like, what if I didn't show up for those people? And the thought of not being there for someone like can outweigh any fear or courage issues that might get in the way. Another thing, is time. Time is precious, and we have to ask ourselves, intention is like one of my power words. I should really have it like tattooed on my arm, because I'm asking myself this constantly, like, what is my intention? What is my intention today? What is my intention for this meeting? Something that I've learned is, if you're the one who spent the time to be prepared or to have the ideas, like, there's a good chance that that's the plan they're going to go with. So if it's something that's worth your time, you need to invest the pre-work, to get your agenda or your idea move forward. So I think the hurdles of courage and time are surmountable. You got to have the right voices around you to help you get over those things.
Oh, that's great. So we have two separate questions, and I encourage anybody else who's got a question to make sure you put it in that Q&A box down in the middle, or wherever it is, somewhere on your screen. But the first thing, someone was asking, do you run into other, let's say, Reno residents that are saying, look, not just what's the future of our season, but are they worried about the future of baseball in Reno? Because I know there's been so much talk about minor league baseball and some teams going away, and I know that's the lower leagues, but do you find that some people are concerned or not too much, or what are you seeing?
Yeah, certainly it's a topic that's brought up. The PBA negotiations, that's a real thing. It
Mm,
happens to be occurring simultaneous to a pandemic. So, I mean, heck of a year we're living in right now.
yeah,
I am encountered by that question, and the way I answer it is that baseball, AAA baseball, will be back in Reno. It's just a matter of when. I don't know if it's going to be 2020. I don't know that.
right,
Nobody knows that if we're going to play
right.
baseball this year. However, we will be back, and if it's not this year, there'll be an opening day next year in our beautiful ballpark in 2021.
That's a great answer. And by the way, I am biased to a great extent. I've got family in Reno, and my dad lives nearby in Incline Village in Lake Tahoe, which is one of the most gorgeous places on the planet. So
Uh-huh.
I can see how you're maybe reluctant to want to relocate. I mean, it's just a beautiful place to be. And plus, there's all those great casinos. No, you wouldn't know about those, I know. Um, but another question is, what kind of advice would you give your younger self?
I love this question. There's so many things that, like, obviously you grow older, you grow wiser. But I wouldn't tell my younger self anything, because I'm just so grateful and I'm so happy with the place that my life is in right now, due to the hard work and like the really hard lessons that I had to learn along the way. It's easy for me to tell my story and to make it sound like it was all sunshine and roses, like through this nonlinear path to get to this chair. But if you remember, like my first result of my first job was a door slamming in my face.
Yeah,
Like, if I knew what I knew today, yes, I probably would have won the role, at the Chicago Bulls. However, like, I don't think life learns that way or works that way. But I will give some advice to people who are younger, who want advice for the future. Um, One is networking. Everyone hates that word because they think it's all cheap beer and crappy wine and, showing up to things you don't want to go to. But what I want to tell you about that is showing up, here's that word again, with intention. So, like, why are you going? And then what is your goal? Every time I go to a networking event, my goal is to collect 3 business cards, and then I leave. Every time. Like, I might be there for like 10 minutes or 2 hours. However, if I'm going to carve the time out of my busy schedule to show up for somewhere, because first I vetted that it was worthwhile for my time. And second, like, my goal in showing up, I created like another competition. Like, my goal is to have 3 conversations that are meaningful enough that we exchange business cards. So think about what that goal means for you and start doing it every single time. The second piece on networking is, if you meet somebody great, introduce them to somebody else that you know that you think they could work with. And I call that networking through service. And I promise you it'll pay back tenfold. So I try to do that whenever I can.
well done.
And then
Go ahead.
one more
Yeah,
thing, find a mentor. And if you can't find a person, like an actual person who will serve you and you serve them, and you have this great relationship and you make all your coffee dates, like, if that can't happen for you, then find somebody you admire and follow them. It can be Oprah, for all I care. Follow her and her quotes and her ideas and the decisions that she makes, and read the news articles about her. You can find a mentor through admiration, if that, like, physical person to person is not available to you at the moment.
well, heck, they should pick you as a mentor. What the heck? Or me. Anyway, so no, but that was really good. One of the things I like to talk about when going to an event is, and I teach people this all the time, is they say, look, if possible, know who's going to be in the room in advance of going, and be strategic about who you speak with. And if it's a panel discussion afterwards, make sure you at least speak to 1 or 2 of those people on those panels. They'll remember you for that. And I like the idea of collecting the cards, but don't try to meet everybody in the room and that sort of thing. But if you can sort of anticipate in advance, gee, I know that these 3, 4, 5 people are going to be here. I need to make sure I try to chat with them. The other quick little trick I've heard that I was like, oh, wish I thought of this myself, but it's fabulous, is the notion that whenever you're hearing someone speak, and then at the end they're done, and they say, do you have any questions? Be the first question. Ask the first question, because everybody will remember you for that, as will the presenter. The presenter always remembers the person asking the first question. It's if I'm speaking and whoever it is asks me something first, I am thrilled, because there's always that pressure of that thing of like, oh God, is anybody going to ask any questions? I hope so. And oh yes, Bob, tell me what's your question? And then afterwards, I can then go to speak to that person. They'll be, it's a connection. So try to always have a question that you have in your back pocket reserved for that person in advance. Just don't try to think of it off the cuff, but have something that you can tee up and ask, and you're off and running. Anyway, we could talk about networking forever, but yes, it's so essential. And I'm glad you brought that up, Emily. So we have one more question. We have another question from TJ, and he says, teams in sports structure their front office in different ways. Have you seen a trend towards more business people or baseball people promoted to senior roles? And is there a way to define GM, president, operations, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mix. It depends on who you're working for. Like you stated, TJ, if you're working in baseball operations, like sure, be a baseball person. However, you can be a baseball person and be super successful at sales because you're selling to baseball people. So there is a role for everyone. It's just understanding what you're applying for. And then one trick that I give to people is like, before you go in, make sure you've read the job description. And then for every bullet point in the job description, think of how you fit into that bullet. Here is one thing that I did. Here is one way I contributed. Here is one thing I could do. And know that before you go sit in that chair to interview for that spot.
Hey, how do you feel? What's your, because I wrestle with myself, which looks really weird, but I wrestle with myself all the time about the notion of the people that really truly believe in analytics versus the traditional, the hunch, I'm going with this guy and this pinch hitting it, whatever it is. Or what's the balance?
I mean, the feeling is, it's kind of, it's on its way out. Like there's still lots of organizations that still employ the feeling. And I think it's important. I think that's what baseball was born around. But as you can see in all of our sports industry, like in everything that we do, whether it's analyzing the players or analyzing like fan data, there's technology everywhere ready to sell to you to get better wins, whether that's on the field or in your pocketbook with the number of tickets you've sold or the big sponsorship deal you crushed. Data is king, and it's what people are asking for. But on the baseball ops side, like I love the mix. Like I've been so fortunate to meet some of the people who have been working in baseball operations from the Diamondbacks or scouting for them for 50 plus years. And those are conversations I would not trade for the world. The rich baseball history, just thinking about it, it's incredible. And I can't imagine a world where that doesn't exist. And so my hope is that craft can stick around in the next generation.
John was asking if, with everything going on in baseball right now, in terms of the battle of, owners versus players just to get this season going, we went through some of this in previous strike years and so forth. Is there a feeling that within baseball that, holy crap, we might be really screwing this up? We may be, if we blow 2020, we may really take a hit in 2021 because fans will be like, screw you guys, we'll watch curling. or whatever, right? You know,
Mhm.
is it just something that's so ingrained in us that we'll forgive?
It's hard to judge fan sentiment, I- especially like how willing are people to go out, be in public, attend events. Like there's so many unknowns around that.
Yeah.
Certainly, I don't think Major League Baseball is doing anyone any favors not playing this year. I hope we can figure out a way to make that happen. But there's a lot involved with getting up and running. I'm not just talking about like the owners and the players association, like trying to get to a deal. I'm talking also about like, how do you make a season work during a pandemic? And listen, there's a lot of guys on a baseball roster, and we're all going to travel heavy. Um, and the testing protocols and like what has to happen and during the day with these guys, doing it without fans. Like, what if somebody tests positive? The hurdles are immense. There was a really good article. I can't remember if it was MLB.com or ESPN.com, but they did a really good outline of like what a day would look like for a player. I think it was Jeff Passan maybe. Anyway, it's a really good read because it's enlightening to the hurdles of today to get playing. And yes, a lot of this is about money right now, but it's also about player safety. And we don't want anybody to get sick or to get hurt. We want to halt this virus.
Now, one thing I saw that I thought was absolutely hilarious that they were talking about the NHL actually was someone said that they should allow one fan per each team to go to the game so that they can have one person yelling out, "Hey, shoot the puck," or or "Refs, you suck," or something. I think it'd be great for baseball also that they have one fan in every section, so everyone's a mile away from each other, but they're all at least you add no fans is creepy, but have a couple people out there yelling like "Hey, shortstop, you suck," or whatever it is, something to add something to it a little bit. I mean, I think the piped in fan noise might be a little bit weird, and I don't know. I'm sure you saw that. Overseas in Asia, they had the cardboard cutouts
I
of the
did.
people in the stands, and that seemed a little
KBO is
creepy too.
keeping everybody entertained right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the no fans it's hopefully it's temporary. Like it's how you get started, and then you hope to welcome people around the leagues. We've been putting together really, really good plans on how we're going to social distance. You submit that to the governor's office for consideration. It's just, there are things there's no playbook for this.
Right.
But I think there's been a lot of good information sharing, task force creation, government lobbying. Like it doesn't end. And the idea is to get this going. Everybody wants to return to play, but
They
we
really
want to do
do.
it safely and without jeopardizing the future of the sport. And I think that's what the Players Association is really concerned about at the moment is you set a new precedent, like there's no going back. And it doesn't seem like there's a lot of trust in the negotiation right now. And it's hard to build trust during this time.
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that if the educated fan anyway will understand both positions. They may agree with neither, and they may say, "Jesus, let's just have our game back. We're dying to, even if it's watch it on TV with no fans, but we want to see the crack of the bat or hear the crack of the bat and so forth." But I know that there's as you said, it's complicated across the board, and I know that there's reports today that sort of leaked out that suggest that maybe there's a couple of players and some team personnel that have had the virus or have it or something or other. So and there's conjecture of how that got leaked and who leaked it and all this kind of stuff. So it's a big soap opera right now. But we covered a lot of ground today. It's something that number one, I know I've said it before, but I'm super impressed with not just the job that you're doing, but your views. And you've got a very sort of a big, wide open viewpoint of the future of not just Reno Aces, but but how a team can be run and sort of the bigger picture sort of a thing. I liked what you talk about regarding intention. We also talked about, how it is running a team during a time of crisis like this. And we talked about the importance of networking. So we covered a lot of ground, but is there anything one more, another piece of advice you'd love to give the listeners and watchers here, just about, especially if you're an athlete and you've been going through some of this stuff here, what can you tell them, is on the other side of this?
Yeah, my piece of advice would be never stop learning. So as each day passes, like it's a day we can't get back. And if we're just sitting around waiting, like we've been in this horrible waiting place for way too long, but try to create value out of that time. A few ways that you can do that. There's tons of classes you can take online. Ask yourself, what are you curious about? What do you want to learn more about? We do have a little bit more time in our day right now to add in some reading, some learning, some listening. Coursera is a great website to check out for courses, paid and free. Of course, there's a lot of industry experts available everywhere, really specific in their expertise that you can purchase courses from. Podcasts, I always talk about the podcast tool. I am the biggest fan of podcasts. If you're not listening to podcasts, like I don't know what it is that you're doing, because there's one out there. Yeah, there's one out there for everybody. I know that our host today, Mark, has one, so give it a listen. The Aces have one with Aces Loaded with Zach Bayruti, and then also, depending on what you're interested in, if you're trying to get better at everything, you want to learn from experts. The School of Greatness with Lewis Howes is awesome.
Yeah.
If you're running an organization, At the Table with Patrick Lencioni is a great podcast on organizational health. The Ed Milet Show is a great podcast on just like personal development, sports business radio. I mean, I can just go on and on and on. Just, it's all on your phone for free. Listen to it when you're commuting, working out, whatever. If you do one thing, like keep learning. Doesn't stop when you're done with school. It'll serve you in the long term.
Well stated. Wow. And it's, look, especially now, everything is at our fingertips, everything. And so, as you said, take advantage of this free time. I mean, quite frankly, I'm pretty confident that it may have been tougher to book you to appear on this if we were playing baseball right now. So yeah. I really, so I guess I'm thankful no, I'm not thankful of the virus. No, I'd rather not be doing this right now.
Silver linings are good. They're
right.
a good thing. They're appropriate. We should be looking for them all the time.
Well stated. So, listen, you've been a fantastic guest here for the Make Your Mark Live episode, and it's all part of the Win Again Academy, which, we're launching soon, and it's all meant to really bring in and have a platform for athletes to learn about all kinds of things, including running a baseball team. So you've been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll have the replay up soon, and any further questions, feel free to shoot them to me and I can forward them on. And what's the best way to reach you and connect with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Emily Jaenson, or on Instagram at Emily Jaenson, and my last name, Jaenson. So come find me, connect with me. Can't wait to learn more about you and see if there's any way that I could help.
And good news for all listeners, you've all received a coupon for one free running around the bases at the Reno Stadium. Emily will let you into the locked stadium and let you do that. Thanks, Emily.
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, well, thanks again, everybody, for being a part of this. And we'll be all talking soon. And let's keep our fingers crossed that as we speak and as we record this thing, they're figuring it out at the Major League Baseball offices. So thanks again for being with me, Emily, and have a great rest of your day.
My pleasure. Thanks, Mark.